Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining myself, Sophie Parrott, a journalist at HR Grapevine, today for an HR Grapevine and cross-knowledge webinar titled 6 Ways HR Can Upskill Their Business at Scale. With so much changing in the working landscape, upskilling and reskilling will continue to be a top agenda item for HR and L&D professionals. And today I am delighted to be joined by Jan Rijken, who is the Learning Director at Cross Knowledge, who will be able to share more and talk more around this subject. But before we dive into today's presentation, I just wanted to talk you through a bit of housekeeping before we get started. So we'll be launching a couple of polls throughout the webinar, so please feel free to get involved as and when those do pop up on your screen. There's also a question function located in the toolbar at the side of your screen where you can put forward any questions to Jan, and we'll try and get through as many as possible towards the end of the webinar. But without any further ado, I'd just like to hand over directly to Jan to discuss the topic further.
Well, thanks very much, and good day to you all, and thanks for joining today. A warm welcome to you all, wherever you are after this holiday season. On the registration list, I saw some old friends, some newcomers joining, so welcome to everyone in a good mix. The world around is changing faster and faster at an increasing pace and provides challenges for all of us in our role, and many organizations are struggling. Many employees are struggling too. What I intend to do in this webinar is cover a lot of topics. I'll turn off my camera now so you can see the screen, and I'll continue then, let's say, the webinar. COVID's still around and leaving traces, and the question is, can we find a new balance? Is the big resignation coming up as predicted? So that's a question that you may be facing. And what can people development professionals and functions influence and act on? Upskilling is the big challenge for us all. So the question is, are you ready? Are you ready to perform? Are you ready to deliver? And what are your challenges? What will we cover today? So we'll take a look at our turbulent environment. What do I see happening and impacting, especially the L&D function? Then the topic of digital learning maturity. What is it? How can we influence it? And why do we want to influence and progress it? And the third topic is the map to reshape your skills landscape. Will provide you with the opportunity to do that and share the cross-knowledge digital learning barometer with you. I'm aiming for some interactivity, so as mentioned, we'll launch a few poll questions to make sure that you're in there. We get different views from people, and at the end there's an opportunity for you to ask any questions. In terms of the objectives, I'm aiming to inform you a little bit. I'm aiming to inspire you, and also, to activate and generate some ideas. Before I move on, a little bit about me, but not too much. I'm a learning director at Wiley Cross Knowledge, where, let's say, I support big corporate clients with their strategic people development issues, mostly at board level. I'm a visiting professor at IE Business School, where I especially run two programs. One is the masterclass for future CLOs, and the other one is the program for CHROs called HR in the Digital Age. And I am also running the L&D Creativity Center. I'm a former Chief Learning Officer, so I had 4 roles, but global roles at KPMG, Daimler, and ABN AMRO, where I led and transformed the learning function. The picture you see is me on the houseboat where we live, water on 3 sides, a big garden on the 4th. Unfortunately, a bad summer, that we can't influence that. and you see a few of my publications. Later this year, I'll be running a webinar around my latest book, which is called 49 Tools for Learning and Development, where we've identified 49 tools. We show them, we talk about, what is the tool and what's the app, how can you apply it in your own environment. So before we move on, I would like to ask you 2 poll questions. So are you ready to contribute? Please answer as openly as you can. There's anonymity, so we won't hold it against you. So please look at the first poll question.
Thanks, Jan. So I've just launched the first poll here, which you'll be able to see on your screen, which is around how many years you have been in your current role. So there are 4 different options for you to choose from today. The first is 0 to 2, then 3 to 5, 6 to 8, and more than 9. So I'll just give you guys another couple of seconds to cast your votes, and then I can read off the results. Okie dokie. So in terms of the results, the most popular answer with 83% was between 0 and 2.
Right.
9 plus was 11%, 6% for between 3 and 5, and nothing for between 6 and 8. So I suppose we've got a varying variety there of different lengths in the current role.
That's good to hear. So we've got an interesting mix with the majority of people relatively new in their current role, although they may have had a role in L&D before. Can you please launch the second poll?
Yes, of course. So the second poll is how many webinars have you attended this year? So once again, there are 4 different options for you to choose from. The first is none, second is between 1 and 3, then we've got between 4 and 5, and more than 6. So I'll just give you guys a little bit more time to cast your votes. Looks as if the majority of people, more than 3/4, have voted so far, so I'll just give it a little bit longer. Okay. So in terms of the results, it looks as if everybody has attended at least one this year because nobody voted for none. With the most, well, actually we've got a tie here. So with more than 6 is 37%, between 4 and 5 is 37%, and 26% said between 1 and 3.
Okay, well, thanks for contributing and sharing. It feels like we're in this together, and 6+ webinars is actually quite impressive. Although let's say there's not many alternatives in the past couple of months, so I can understand that you've attended them. Is it okay to progress? Let's first look at what's happening around us. So what do I see if I look at the world around us? Let's say on the left-hand side, there's a lot of things, area of influence, especially by let's say economy and by technology, I would say. There's a lot of economic and political turbulence, which we're all faced with. But especially, let's say, technology and digitalization is hitting organizations. So it's causing organizations to look at their business, to look at their business models, and think about, how can we survive? How can we distinguish? A great example is one of our banks, one of our clients is let's say in the banking industry. There used to be a retail bank and now a fintech bank, which means, if you look at 5 years ago and now, their employee amount has decreased by 45%. There's also the talent shortage and the demographics. So we've got 5 generations in the workforce. and pension date shifting. So what do we do with the older employees, and what do we do with the younger employees coming in and let's say with their different preferences? Can we let's say cater to those? And of course, we've got the jobs and tasks changing. If you look at research, you now see quite a bit of mention about tasks rather than jobs. But there's a lot of new jobs and new tasks around. Over the past 1.5 years, we have all been affected by COVID. For the first time ever, health and safety and well-being was an issue in our organizations with people working from home. But that also impacted the learning area. People were, let's say, working remotely, but also had to be led remotely by line managers. So that was an issue, and that had impact on the way that people were learning. People are at the moment also looking for, where do I want to be? Which organization do I attach myself to? And purpose is a word that you read and hear a lot. And people are looking for a good balance in terms of hybrid working, but also in terms of work and private. And upskilling, reskilling, and outskilling is more important than ever before. That's a red thread in this webinar. Outskilling is a new term that especially relates to those organizations that are phasing out people, but as a responsible employer, they offer learning to those people that they're phasing out. So let me now share some research with you that reinforces the challenge that L&D faces and how much you in your role are needed. The good news is that until a few years ago, we were saying that we needed to upskill the workforce, but actually it's now the CEOs recognizing that the lack of key skills is a serious threat to growth, innovation capacity and cost management. So you've got the senior management behind you. And secondly, let's say, and this is actually quite scary, that 87% of companies have skills gaps or expect to have them within 2 years. So I'm not sure whether you recognize this, but it is let's say, quantifying the challenge that we have. Capability building is more valuable and more important than ever before. And let's say during COVID, capability building is even more important to organizations' long-term growth. And of course, there's many ways that you can do that. You can, decide to hire people that you need if you need those skills. You see them in graph on the right-hand side in yellow. But most organizations actually say that we want to build skills and redeploy people, building their skills to make sure that we have the workforce that we need. So skill building is the key to survive, and if done in a scalable way, it can also contribute to retaining and recruiting your future talent. The big question now is how can we approach, plan, and realize skill building at scale? And I think the key is to first of all identify the blind spots in our organization and possible quick wins when it comes to digital learning maturity. And I'll let's say build further on that. Before I move to look at digital learning maturity, I'd like to take 2 side steps to look at what L&D is facing. First of all, what are the skills? Because we're talking about skill building. What are the skills that organizations and employees will be needing? And the slide I'm showing you now is the result of collaboration between the World Economic Forum Research and McKinsey. I won't go into detail, but there's 2 things that jump out. If you look on the, let's say at the blue, it's the digital. A few years ago, that wasn't as prominent as it is. So I think there's going to be a big focus on reskilling people in the digital space. And another one area that I want to highlight is on the right, let's say the mental flexibility. That's another area that, let's say, has become very apparent during COVID, and that organizations will be focusing on going forward. And of course, let's say the content of the slides can be made available for you. Judge for yourself what your organization's priorities are in terms of skill focus and what will be in future. And I can only encourage you to have engaging discussions with your business leaders to define what are the priorities and how do we get there. If you're wondering how to do that, I wrote an article called the 15 questions that L&D should ask. It's available on the internet, but otherwise reach out and I can make it available. The second area that I want to address is, what are the issues that I hear L&D leaders are facing at the moment. Where are you in your tactical and strategic journey? These are 5 trends that I'm seeing. The first one is I call from transportation to transformation. L&D was focusing on delivering a lot of programs. And I think now most of us are involved in transformation, which is really good for our profession. Very close to strategy. We are, let's say, seen as a performance partner in the benchmark organizations. The second one, accelerated by COVID, is from classroom to the workplace. Classroom training wasn't possible in most organizations in the past 1.5 years. So a blend was needed. Digital learning became more important than ever before, and workplace learning also, let's say, accelerated. And in that same process, I see a trend from push to self-directed learning. Many organizations were still pushing learning, and that will still remain. Part of learning will have to be pushed from an organizational standpoint. Things like compliance, health and safety, and other high-profile training and programs will still be pushed. But I see more self-directed learning than ever before. So employees taking responsibility and leveraging the good learnings in all ways, formal, informal, that you're offering and facilitating. The fourth trend that you'll also see later on in the digital learning maturity overview is the trend from content to context. I think traditionally L&D has always been focusing on developing and delivering great content, and we should keep doing so, but taking the context into account. Where does the learner go? Is he supported in his context by line managers, by colleagues, but also by performance support tools to make sure that the learnings can be brought into practice? Is it offered at the right time, at the point of need, so that they can leverage? And the last trend that I see, also accelerated by COVID, is a trend from tools to an ecosystem, where previously organizations had on average 16 tools within HR related to people development, and are now more looking at an integrated ecosystem. So are you still with me? Let's now start to take a look at the 3 key questions related to today's topic. The first one is your organization ready for effective skills building at scale? And are you prepared to grow your digital learning maturity? The second one is, how close are you to your L&D goals, and what good looks like to enable upskilling and reskilling for business impact? The third one is, where are you in your digital learning maturity against where you could be or need to be to achieve those goals for your business? What do you actually know about digital learning maturity? It's not sure what you've read, what you've seen in the past months, but I see more research than ever before on digital learning maturity. It's seen as a big lever by learning leaders. So the Fosway Group research showed that close to 6% thought their organization's adoption of digital learning was immature. and those with mature digital learning approach are twice as likely to have found coping with the impact of the pandemic easy. So that's, you know, quite staggering and good to realize. But the big question is, how can digital learning maturity add value for you and your organizations? We covered these questions in our June webinar, which is still available. But you know, I'll cover some of these questions and findings in summary during this webinar. How can a maturity model become useful to you as learning professional and strategy? And you know, what can digital learning maturity help you to achieve? And actually, you know, research and practice with our clients show that there's quite a few areas where digital learning maturity can contribute. It can help you achieve higher impact and efficiency through your corporate learning strategy. It can help you strengthen the L&D value proposition internally, and I think many organizations that's needed. I often talk to L&D leaders, you know, 2, 3, 4 a week, in addition to our masterclass students, and it's something that they were struggling with, the L&D value proposition internally. How is L&D perceived? What value are we delivering? You know, what kind of active sponsorship have we got from senior stakeholders? Digital learning maturity can contribute. And how can you accelerate on your L&D digital transformation to pivot at the speed of business? Because L&D cannot stay behind. We have to adapt to the speed of business change, and where possible, you know, stay ahead of that. And actually, I'm sure you're now getting quite curious about the how. How do I do this? Nice story, Jan, but you know, how can I do this? And that's the topic that I'd like to address now. How, you know, can we progress? All of us need guidance, and preferably a good map. What I'd like to address is, you know, based on more than 100 client interactions, surveys in 3 masterclass groups, and quite a bit of research on existing maturity maps, and especially discussions with my good friend Josh Bursin. We've run a few webinars together, and you know, we help our research. So the digital learning maturity approach that I'm about to show you is based on more than 20 years experience in digital learning. We've developed our own map to help you navigate the changes and accelerate your transformation. The map is very pragmatic. That enables us and you to measure, analyze, and progress your digital learning maturity. You know, we aim to support organizations in their digital learning maturity journey. Let's take a look at the map, if you're okay with that. And I'll now do, you know, a deeper dive, and it starts with 3 levels. The first level is what we call, and this is the fundamental level, it's called access to learning. Organizations, you know, who are typically at this level, they've got some digital learning experience, a lot of focus on regulatory programs and completion. L&D is quite reactive with no solid systemic indicators for business needs and impact. The technology, the learning technology environment is most likely quite fragmented, and the user experience is not engaging. There could be a first movement into democratizing access to learning from top down to self-directed learning, and there's a limited use of learning data. We've seen it with some of our clients who, you know, buy a learning suite, launch it without too much support, and then after 6 or 9 months actually say, the results are disappointing. And we then start to look at the outcomes with them, and usually we can clearly identify areas which they need to progress. So that was the first level, access to learning. The second level is what we call the integrated learning experience. There's a gradual alignment between L&D strategy and business prios, with needs analysis becoming more systematic and proactive. Content is more contextualized, with focus on learner context. Learners can interact with each other and are supported through the learning environment, the learning technology. The user experience is enhanced through use of generated data, allowing a certain degree of personalization. So maybe you recognize some of these elements in your specific organization. So that's the second level that we've identified based on the research. The third one is what we call effective skills building at scale. And typically, this is characterized by organizations' learning strategy is aligned with business strategy. L&D has a strong governance, which includes business reps. Learning experience is enriched and can be deployed at larger scale at lower costs. L&D functions recognize the value they bring, which can be measured against tangible business indicators. We can now speak of a true learning organization, and the learning climate and ecosystem are supportive to personal and professional development for all. So I've covered these three areas, and let's say in a minute I'll cover the more specific dimensions against which we measure to see at which level organizations typically are. But before I move on, another short poll. You know, I've described three separate levels. When you hear those descriptions, I'd like an opinion from you in a poll question. So can you please launch that poll for me?
Yeah, thanks, Jan. So I'm just distributing the poll now, which has just appeared on your screen. So the question is, where do you position yourself as an organisation on the digital learning maturity map? Three different options there. The first is access to learning, integrated learning experience, and effective skills building at scale. So I'll just give you guys a little bit more time. It looks as if almost half of you have voted so far, which is good. Okay, I'm just going to close the poll and share the results. Okay, so coming out on top with 56% is access to learning. Integrated learning experience is 39%, and effective skills building at scale is 6%. Is that, I guess, Jan, is that what you were expecting, or?
Well, thanks first of all for let's say answering the poll and answering it honestly, because this is actually what we see. Let's say towards the end, I'll share the outcomes of a recent survey that we did. But I think this is let's say generally in the same space that you've now answered. In order to, let's say, make it even more concrete, let's look at those 6 dimensions one by one, which we've identified and which we believe together, add up to a good indicator of your learning maturity level. 6 dimensions, as I said, and the first one, learner. Let's start with the learner, because that should be the starting point of actually everything we do. So if we look at this dimension, the questions that we use in our survey are linked to two indicators related to the learner. The first one is your learning offer structurally supported by the right amount of learner marketing and internal comms?
Sorry to interject, Jan.
Yeah,
The screen seems to have frozen on the poll, so would you mind just unsharing and resharing your screen, please?
yeah, of course. Let me see. Stop.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
It's back. Okay, thanks for that. That helps. So I'm focusing on the first I mentioned, the learner. So the first indicator of this is to which extent you are supporting the learning offer through learner marketing and internal communication. So what do you know about the learner? What do you know about the learner? What they want? And to which extent are you supporting them with the right amount of information? Many organizations, launch learning without a lot of marketing. Earlier in my career, I did that at Mercedes. I first learned when I was launching larger programs how important it is to also launch learner marketing. I was spending, I would say, 96% of my budget on learning programs and 4% on marketing. And when I talked to a marketeer, he asked me, "What do you do to launch your to launch your learning programs?" And I said, "Well, we send out a mail." And he said, "And?" I said, "Well, that's it." So I learned about identifying learner groups, looking at their diversity, let's say making personas, and then looking at the different learning channels that we can use, the marketing channels to send out communication and marketing. The second dimension related to learning is to which extent is the learner supported through communities to which extent do they have the autonomy to learn and especially link with peers and use social learning. So this is the first dimension that we measure. Let's take a look at the second dimension, which is line managers. This is a very important dimension because in many organizations, we focus on learners. They go back to the workplace and, they aren't supported. But line managers, if you look at impact research, are probably the biggest accelerator of impact. So we have identified two indicators of the importance of line managers in our maturity map. The first one is to which extent line managers are actively supporting and facilitating employee performance development and employee learning. So are they creating the conditions? Have they got time to learn? Have they got the opportunity to learn? Have they got the tools to learn? And this is really important and a big challenge. The second indicator here, is there a positive climate for learning with focus on skills building, career development, and knowledge sharing? To which extent do line managers support that? So if you look at the classical performance development conversations, it's about the what. Have people achieve their objectives? And it's not typically focused on how, and especially on development. So the big challenge in organizations is, can you create a culture where your line managers actually focus on development? And development is more than sending people to courses. It is identifying what skills do people need. Are they willing and eager to learn? Have they got the opportunity to learn? And then what opportunities are there in addition to programs? Because line managers have fantastic opportunities, close to the workplace. They can appoint a buddy, they can have people shadowing, do job shadowing. They can offer performance support tools. They can have people, learners, work in a project to learn. So can they identify learning opportunities other than courses? So these are two indicators for the line managers. Let's take a look at the third indicator, which is L&D capability, which is about you, about us in people development. And I think there's two big indicators that show the importance of the L&D capabilities. The first one is about strategy. So have you got a real strategy, or have you got an action plan? When I go and talk to new L&D leaders in my network, one of the first questions I ask is, show me your learning strategy. And unfortunately, many come up with an overview of what they're offering, which is a nice thing to do and see. But I want to know and see in a strategy, what are you aiming at? What are your goals? How do you intend to do that? What resources have you got? There's a lot of, let's say, opportunities for that strategy. Again, if you want to know more about learning strategy, take a look at the 49 toolbook. It's got 3 or 4 examples on how to develop a real learning strategy. And the second indicator of L&D capability is governance. So what kind of governance have you got in place? Is it really operational? So is it just L&D running the show without too much involvement from others? Have you got a tactical governance in place where you've got SMEs involved, where you've got line managers involved, and to a certain extent, HR business partners? Or have you got a real strategic governance in place with, let's say, business stakeholders who are actively validating your L&D strategy, who are helping you define the priorities, who are helping you secure the resources, and who are actively helping you communicate and market the key learning initiatives, because that's what this is about. That was the third indicator. So, okay, to move to the fourth one, which is, let's say, the learning experience. So, if you look at learning experience, about how we design and deliver the learning. So, two indicators here. Are your learning design methods based on a mindset of design thinking, performance consulting, and how agile are they? Have you got rigorous competency models and skills models, or have you got, let's say, state-of-the-art design thinking processes where you can quickly adapt based on your findings if necessary? And the second one, is the learning offer providing personalized learning experience based on data-driven design and real learner needs? Do you know your learners? Do you know what they need? Do you know what they've previously done in terms of their skill sets? Can you run assessments to find out where they are? Because it's crazy running standardized programs for a big group of learners when all of them have got a different background. So to which extent can you offer personalized learning in your organization? So that's the fourth one, sorry. Let's look at the fifth one, which is about learning architecture. So this is about the learning technology, the learning ecosystem that I earlier mentioned. So to which extent can your employees access their learning anytime, anywhere, on any device? This was very important during COVID, because those organizations that were quite mature in this dimension didn't have a hard time shifting from the classroom-based to the digital-based approach, because their processes were in place, their technology was in place, and the learners were used to accessing on mobile or laptop. And the second indicator here, is your learning ecosystem fully integrated with the bigger organization ecosystem? So with the office tools and also with things like knowledge management. Increasingly across organizations, I am seeing L&D aligning more with the knowledge management functions and business, and also with, let's say, the social communication part, especially, from the standpoint from the learner. They want to access learning, knowledge, and networks at their fingertip, not accessing 3 different systems, but in one system. So have you got that covered in a learning ecosystem? And do you have, let's say, make learning happen in the flow of work? So they were the 2 indicators for the learning architecture. So let's now take a look at the 6th and final dimension of our digital learning maturity map. It's about learning analytics. So 2 indicators again. Are your learning analytics systemic and reliable? Focus on outcomes and performance indicators. That's a big question and a big challenge for many organizations that I talk to. Are your KPIs systematically defined at the start of each learning initiative related to desired and measurable performance outcomes? So where are you with KPIs? Have all your learning initiatives got KPIs? And are they not just measuring what you deliver, but also, what you impact? It's not in this webinar that I'll do a deeper dive here, but again, if you want to know more, then read my article on the 56 key KPIs that L&D can use, or let's say take a look again at the 49 tools for L&D book, which has 3 specific chapters on L&D KPIs and helps you operationalize those. So it's important to cover these 6 dimensions in addition to the 3 levels, because we have seen that these 6 dimensions can help you identify where you are in your progress journey, and this can help you loop back to adapt, improve, and validate what you offer. So that was the deeper explanation of our the digital learning maturity model and its map. Are you okay so far? Does it make sense? The question now is, how can you leverage our insights and model for your own good? The opportunity to reshape your own skills landscape. That's what I want to cover in the final part of my webinar. So what you can do if you've got the appetite is, check your digital learning maturity starting today, tomorrow, next week, by doing the online survey that we offer. It's without obligation, it's free of charge. It can help you understand your digital learning maturity as a key step towards building and reshaping your skills landscape. It can help you measure, analyze, understand, and progress your digital learning maturity. So it's about growth. It's about individual growth, team growth, organizational growth in your journey. And what we do in that survey is ask you 12 questions, 2 on each of the dimensions that I shared with you. So it's a quite light survey. This is just an example of the questions that we ask, and this is related to the L&D capability part, to the governance. So you have a question, you've got answer categories, and you answer those. The result of those 12 questions, you can answer them within 10 minutes if you know your L&D organization. The result is a digital learning maturity map. It's a spider web format, take a look at the spider web here, you can then see where you're placed on each of the dimensions. It's not an end goal, but it's what we say a Polaroid of where you are in your maturity journey, and it gives you an opportunity to reflect, rethink, and progress to the next step. What else is available? So in addition to offering you the survey, you've got the opportunity, if you've done the survey, to access one or two of what we call our learning toolkits, which we've developed to show how you can progress. So again, an example of the toolkit. It gives you an opportunity to do some stakeholder mapping, to reflect more. So you've got a few deeper dive questions on a topic, in this case learning experience, to get more information from your L&D team, from your HR stakeholders if you want, which gives you an opportunity to reflect and identify issues and gaps. Then of course, once you've got the answer, you are curious to see what does good look like in terms of learning experience, and where are we? You've got your Polaroid, but you can also see what does good look like, so you can identify the gaps and the route to cover that gap. And last but least, not least, you can optimize. There's a few opportunities that we have identified for you as guidance to progress. So the opportunity for you to pick that up. As I said, we have done. We launched our first survey opportunity at the beginning of June this year. So far, 180 corporate organizations have done the survey, different sizes across different industries. We provide them with personalized insights, so the map you saw, and a benchmarking opportunity. So how do you rate against others in your industry, for instance, which I am sure is interesting for you. When I was a CLO, those were always the things I was interested in. If you look at the average scores, and it relates to the poll that you did, the average score of organizations on all the 6 dimensions was 7.2 on a 0 to 12 scale. So I think that relates quite closely to the outcomes that you've shared with us. Highest scoring dimension was L&D capabilities, and the lowest scoring dimension was learners. But remember, this is what L&D scores, how L&D scores itself. We also have deeper data on how other stakeholders have scored, and if you, for instance, look at the scores that senior management have, let's say, provided us with, they score L&D capabilities a little lower, and other dimensions higher. So the scores differ per stakeholder group. We're nearing the end of this webinar, so the question is, do you have appetite to start your digital learning maturity after the explanation? We invite you to do the survey in the next couple of weeks. In summary, you'll get an individualized report to understand where your organization is in their journey. We'll provide you with access to toolkits to rethink and nurture. You have the opportunity to follow up with our experts to accelerate on your skills landscape, and you'll be the first to receive our benchmark report when this is ready, and I think it's going to be ready somewhere in September. So that's what the survey offers you, so it's up to you to pick it up. There's a website here, but I'm sure that my colleagues will also provide you with more details. What's ahead? If let's say I look at quite a few of the organizations that we're already working with in terms of progressing the digital learning maturity, it's more efficiency for your skills landscape, optimize costs, increase speed, flexibility, and scalability. We've got examples of organizations who are now a few months down the road, who, let's say, are increasing their, let's say, speed in terms of delivery, but also being able to reduce their costs. What we also see is that the digital learning maturity process offers better alignment opportunities with the business strategy, both in terms of the priorities and linking to business stakeholders. And last but not least, more effective skills building with highly personalized and engaging learning experience. For instance, by being more data driven, and for instance, by accelerating in their learner marketing and communication. So this is all possible if you're, let's say, willing and able to go the next step. That basically is the end of my story. I hope it's been interesting and inspiring. You've got one or two ideas. It's been value add in terms of your time, and we have a few minutes for questions. If you want to use the chat, I'll see if I can answer one or two of them now, and otherwise I've got the opportunity to answer them offline. I want to thank you for joining, and let's say now give you the opportunity to ask those questions.
Thanks, Jan. And thank you for those that have sent in questions so far. We've got time just for a couple of quick questions. So the first one is, what would you say are the accelerators for organizations to progress their digital learning maturity?
Yeah, I've covered the 6 dimensions, so it's a good question. If I would name 2 accelerators based on, let's say, the experience with 20 or so clients that we're working with, one is governance. So getting stakeholders on board is important because they can help you align the learning offer to, let's say, performance development processes, but also can act as role models. So governance is one. And I would say the other one is the learning climate. So it's a more difficult process to influence, but if, let's say, you can, together with, let's say, your organization and your supporters, can take steps towards a more positive and actively supportive learning climate, that tremendously influences the impact of learning. So good question. Thanks for that.
Thanks, Jan. And the last question really is, what would you say is the relationship between an organization's digital learning maturity and the capabilities of the L&D team?
That's a good one, but also a sensitive one, because in those organizations that we're supporting, and I can think of 3 or 4 that I'm currently supporting, I am seeing a transition in the L&D team in terms of capabilities. So they have to up their game. I'll give a few examples in terms of, let's say, data analytics. That's a big topic. I think they have to up their game in terms of business alignment, understanding the business needs, understanding the learner needs, and I think the last capability relates to the digital skills. So are they digital savvy? So there's various skills that L&D rapidly needs to acquire to, let's say, be on top of their digital learning maturity journey. So good question, but an important one and a tricky one to handle. If there are no more questions, I want to thank you all for joining. Feel free to reach out and connect with me or with my colleagues. I wish you a great day. Please keep learning and inspiring in your organization, and take care.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and thanks again, Jan and Cross Knowledge, for sharing these insights with us today. Of course, if you do have any questions, feel free to get in touch with Cross Knowledge directly. And I hope you all have a fantastic rest of the day, and we look forward to welcoming you back to additional webinars in future. Thank you, everyone.